Thank you, Minister. I didn't know I could change the title, sorry. First of all, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we stand and the Oregon and Turtle people. And they've been telling stories for thousands and thousands of years, and I think for that reason, as a storyteller especially, I'd like to acknowledge that. And I'd like to, first of all, thank you, Vanessa, for, giving me this opportunity. It's always difficult to stop and reflect, and opportunities like this always allows one to really think about where have I been and where am I going. So thank you. And also like to thank my collaborators, who some of them are here today, and for all of you who come today. I appreciate your help and I appreciate you being here. So I guess the talk today that I'm going to give is really around some evolving ideas around transformative research and how transformative research feeds into my work. As some of you know, my work is very, very personal. A lot of ideas that I have come from within in relation to issues or political issues or social issues external to me. And so that will kind of shape my talk today. What I'd like to do now is show you a little clip from one of my documentaries that gives you a little bit more idea of my background.
My obsession with America started in Hungary, where I was born. In the 1970s, Hungary was communist, cut off from the free world. I was 6 when my parents divorced. Dad went to America to study. My sister and I stayed with Mum. I hated school. I hated having to learn Russian. I was hopeless at it.
Putsi Switzerland Nevaki Sovietsky Soyuz.
I had red hair, I was shy, and I was bullied. My great escape was American movies. I saw every American action movie that came out. They were about truth and justice. The bad guys were almost always Russian. And the good guys were always American. My childhood heroes were President Ronald Reagan, Sylvester Stallone, and above all, Arnold Schwarzenegger. They protected the weak, crushed the bad guys, and made the world a safer place. Arnie was my favorite.
Just do what I tell you. I'm counting on you, buddy. Don't let me down.
Yes, obviously I have worked through my issues about America. Good time. That was 10 years ago. I do see the world in a lot more complex way. I didn't jump back to the other slide of the address, but Vanessa did talk a little bit about it anyway. But yes, I have been in the industry for quite a long time, and I guess my research focus is innovating storytelling and really finding new audiences, and that's what keeps me up at night, is how do I tell stories not to the converted but to people, audiences that perhaps haven't been reached with those particular social justice issues. And obviously technology comes into that. It's a critical part of my methodology, and so I'll talk more about immersive storytelling later, but yeah, those things are really, really important to me. I will say a few more words about my background, because as I said earlier, it does shape my work as a storyteller. So I had a quite complex childhood. My grandparents were probably the greatest influence in my life. My grandmother on my mother's side was a Roma, so I didn't know that she was Roma until I was 15. My mother didn't know either, so it was a big surprise for us, and because she in fact hid it from us. She was so ashamed of it. And of course in Hungary, as you probably know, that the whole Roma question is very sensitive and there's a great deal of discrimination. So finding that out as a child, as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, was quite significant. On my father's side, it's even more complex. My grandmother was in the Holocaust, and so again, growing up as a 12-year-old and having to eat everything on my plate, and if I didn't eat it, it would be turned into lunch or dinner, as my grandmother, of course, was starved to death in the Holocaust, and so that again was etched in my memory. And then, of course, there was my grandfather, who was a illegal communist fighter during World War II, and he fought against the Nazis. He protected the Roma, and later on, 10, 15 years after the communist takeover, he became the Prime Minister of Hungary. And so he made some decisions as the Prime Minister, as the Minister for Agriculture, that perhaps cast a shadow on my family. And what was interesting at that point in the story is that my first documentary, in fact, was about my grandfather. Little did I know at that time that that documentary that I made back in '99 would have a great influence on my life from that point onwards. And not just because I made that film about my grandfather, but also because he said something to me as part of the interview that I did with him that perhaps left a big impression on me. And I will play that clip for you. And I will provide a tiny bit of context, is that at the time of my grandfather was the Prime Minister, a revolution broke out, and my grandfather happened to be the Prime Minister at the time, and he was only 35. And so he had the task of deciding whether to call in the Russian troops to put down the revolution or let the revolution happen. And so this interview plays out within that context. And of course, the revolution was put down. The Russians did come in, and he did sign a piece of paper that invited the Russians.
Itt vannak a magyarok együtt, akkor csinálunk egy független Magyarországot, érted? És azt kellett volna,
Jó.
Mi?
Jó, hát ez rendben van, ez a véleményed. Csak ez egyszerűen olyan naivitás, hogy egyszerűen világra szóló naivitásnak tartom én.
Igen,
Nem, naivitásnak tartom, nem, hogy egyetértek, nem lehet. Nem az a probléma, hogy a naivitással egyetért az ember, csak csodálkozik rajta.
And so I think my work moves around in the world around optimism and kind of naivety. So I'm a very optimistic person, but certainly that conversation with my grandfather, etched in my memory, kind of made me realize at that point how important it was is to look at different realities and the complexity of the realities that surround us. And I spent a great deal of time after that, writing my dissertation course and doing my doctorate, where I kind of looked at social justice issues and tried to look at them from, I guess, a number of different perspectives. That was really, really important. And so this kind of takes me up to transformative research. And I think I became interested in transformative research just a couple of years ago because of all these really important, aspects of what transformative research is. And I do feel that, given the global challenges that we face as a country, as a nation, as a society, but also as a world, I think transformative research has a very good place. Addressing challenges in society through concerted effort by a group of researchers. So already I think of CARI, I think of the Greater Griffith University, that in fact houses those experts who can work together and create long-term impacts. And of course there's a difference between long-term impacts and short-term impacts, and I'll talk more about that later as well, but certainly in my case as a filmmaker, I would argue that my films have made impact, but I would also argue that they haven't made long-term impacts as I would have expected. And what's also exciting about transformative research is that it has the possibility to grow and to multiply and to transform and to evolve into other opportunities. So in terms of my experience in transformative research is very good. In the late 90s and early 2000s, I had the great opportunity to be making documentaries for the ABC and SBS. And those documentaries were made, I was the producer, writer, director, and I had a great deal of good people around me, of course, but I led the process primarily. And what's interesting is that you would get funding for your documentaries, but what was not there, wasn't present, is the training for how to create impact. Often filmmakers would receive close to $300,000 to make a film, which of course was justified. But then because they had new ideas and of course they had to pay the bills, they moved on after the broadcast happened, after the broadcast took place on SBS or the ABC, so there's no space for that. And of course there's also been a discussion in the early 2000s and late 90s about can documentaries really change the world? And obviously you've heard that I'm quite optimistic. I always thought, had a very strong belief that they can change the world, and of course that opinion, that view has evolved again through my doctoral work, which I'll talk about later as well. But Brian Winston, who's a wonderful man, wrote this, and I think it does demonstrate that there was a lot of the dilemmas about documentary, whether it's really transformative or not transformative. The turning point for me really came when I started working for micro projects. There's a P micro, but micro projects and the community resource unit. I really enjoyed that work, and they're organisations, local organisations in Brisbane, who work with the disadvantaged. Micro projects has been around for a very long time, as crew, and micro projects works with the homeless, works with forgotten Australians, works with young mothers. They're really embedded in the community. Crew is working in the disability sector, again, very effective in the way they do. So I was quite lucky to be making films about their work that fitted into their overall initiatives. I will show you a little bit of the film that I made for my account. Back then, I was so blown away by the technology that you could actually superimpose writing on the wall of buildings. That was something that was kind of exciting, and look where we are now, 12 years later. So I guess my proposition and my hope is that looking at great large-scale transformative projects around the world, and in Australia as well, and what we do here at Griffith, that I do hope that screen practice can play a critical role in transformative research processes. I did say this, but I'll reiterate that screen work, film animation, and also games, has the potential to create empathy, bring awareness to certain issues and advocate for a cause. I do also think that we're in a unique moment in time when, I guess, globally and also locally, we're challenged by some very, very serious and critical issues. Our research, in some ways, has been slowed down, perhaps, but the budget has been tight at the university, and I think is elsewhere as well. So the question is, how do we proceed? How do we go on and continue to be inspired to make a difference? And I think this is probably the best time to be thinking about making changes and continuing with our research when things are hard. And I think one thing that I've also, I found this quote 3.5 years ago when I became the Deputy Director for Research and Engagement, and I was quite inspired by this quote, because when I look at that, I see this beautiful cycle taking place internally here at the university, in fact all universities. The idea is that we create knowledge through our research. We go out there, we find knowledge, we fill the gap, and we take that knowledge and we take that and we disperse that knowledge throughout learned teaching. And so to me, that is the perfect cycle in an ideal world where we can all work together and really can invite our students, our colleagues to work with us to create research, and that it becomes teaching as well. I think it's going to be really important for us to think about on all levels. As I said, because things are tough, money is tight, we need to look at ways of working together. Obviously, it's easy to say, and some might even consider this to be naive, again, very optimistic, but I think, I would certainly, at the film school, try to kind of implement these ideas as much as I can as the Deputy Director of Research. There's another quote I'm going to bring up, and the person who wrote it is in the room. It's a quote that speaks to me quite deeply, and for all the reasons that I described earlier on about my background and why I'm so obsessed with social justice. But it is that discomfort that certainly pushes me to question the world around myself, and that's certainly something that I try to instill into my students as well. And I'm quite proud as well that my colleagues, some of them here today, also believe that, and I can see it through their teaching and their research. They're trying to advocate for those very, very same things. Now, I'm going to do an exercise here. Last week I just looked at my news feed, and I gathered a few pieces of news. And I think it's interesting what comes at us at a very quick speed. There's one, we like click on it, like that one over here. Okay, there's another one. Yep, that's happening as well. Next. Yep, okay, 110 million people. These are numbers I can't even fathom. I don't know about you, but it is so hard to physically and emotionally really, in some ways, take this on. Oh, there's something else completely out of the blue, whatever that is. I can't even understand what that is. Beach House comes with a snow catch. I almost clicked on that. I didn't. And again, this is happening right here in Australia. So this is how grotesque, I guess our world has become, I would argue. And this is, of course, a very sad part of history. And again, a number, if you think about it, 49.6, that's Australia's population is about 26. That's as many people multiplied by 2, and that's how many people are in slavery today, right now, in the world. And so, when I get flooded with this information, what do I do? What do we do? What can we do? In a world of information overload, how do we make sense of the world around us? What do we as researchers do? What issue do we tackle? And most importantly, being educators, how do we support the younger generations to kind of find themselves in the jungle of misinformation and selective empathy and such? Because I know they also want to contribute meaningfully to the work. They also want to take part in the work, but it's difficult. And that's a question, of course, for us as well, is that no matter what happens, we need to continue fighting, and we need to continue to take part in transforming this world. interestingly, running back a little bit to my doctorate, which I mentioned earlier, is that one of the questions that I asked is, can documentary films make a difference? Can they make an impact? And Trish Fitzsimons is not here, but she says she's late. But my supervisor, Trish Fitzsimons, at the film school, I remember she said to me, "Oh, Peter, I think you've got to be careful saying that films can change the world. What about saying they can contribute to change?" And I remember, obviously being 26 at the time, feeling quite, again, a bit like what my grandfather said to me, that I'm naive. I'm quite naive that, thinking that documentaries can change the world. And it was the time when Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine came out, so it was a very exciting time. And of course, if you look at the gun culture in America, you could argue that nothing's changed. But it was still a very powerful film. I will show you quickly this clip.
My memory of the Tisa River lies embedded in my childhood. It has flowed through Hungary for generations, constant, clean, and forever linked to the country and its people. But in January 2000, this all changed.
Another European ecological disaster, the catastrophic cyanide spill, devastated major river systems in Central Europe.
Koncentrációjú ciánvegyülettel szennyeződik a
120
számos
tons of
folyó.
cyanide has escaped from the Australian-Romanian gold mine into the major Hungarian Tisa River.
Cyanide killed over 1,200 tons of fish in the river Tisa. It'll take years for the river to recover. Jeff Daniels,
Das Cyanid hatte furchtbare Auswirkungen auf die Tierwelt und hat das Ökosystem besiegt.
The Australian mining company at the centre of a cyanide spill has denied causing an environmental disaster.
Esmeralda Explorations in Perth is the Australian mining company with 50% share in the gold mine in Romania.
It is certainly not an environmental catastrophe.
So, interesting that this film, it had great accolades in the film world, including an Academy Award shortlist, but did it make a societal impact? I would dare to say no, and that's the reality, and it's no surprise given that I focused on making a film, focused on characters telling personal story, human story, and that's the result. But we did get quite an amazing impact story with one of the shareholders of Esmeralda, because Esmeralda was an Australian mining company operating out of Perth. And they had shareholders like you, anyone could become shareholder. And so when the film was broadcast on SBS, literally a day later, I received a number of emails, but one stood out particularly, and it was from a person who was a shareholder in Esmeralda, and he said, "Look, I just saw the film, and I've decided to sell all my shares and donate to the fishermen." So that was like, oh, that felt amazing. That was the moment that I thought, okay, well, maybe films can, Trish is right, Trish Fitzsimons is right, films can contribute to change. Now, I would like to move on to something that's obviously a very important part of screen practice, and I'm sure it is with other creative practice disciplines, is connection and empathy. And I think if I look back to all my films and the Story Festival as well, which I'll talk about later, all these projects, one thing they have in common is that it is all about that connection, the connection that happens between two people, within families, between people. It's really important. And certainly when I think about my immersive films as well, where we try and put people in the shoes of others, which is quite a difficult task. It is, again, about creating connection, and creating that kind of opportunity for the viewer to see something from a different perspective. And I think that's what films can do. That's what animation can do. And that's what screen practice, I think, is doing. So the university environment. So interestingly, when I started working here in 2013, and just to remind you, up to that point, I was a sole producer, writer, director. What I noticed, and it took me a while to notice it, is that maybe, I was obviously a type of filmmaker that I was, but there were many other people at the university in different departments who were concerned about the same things I was concerned about, and I think that was a very slow discovery to understand that I'm not the only one who cares about social justice. There are many people who care about the same thing as I do. And perhaps that was the first time that I kind of started planting the seed around what transformative research can really be about, which is about researchers coming together, working together from different fields to make a difference. And the other thing, of course, that I started to realize is that when you look at a problem in society, it is what we call a systemic problem, And again, being a filmmaker, that's something I certainly didn't really understand, And I'm almost ashamed to say that. I think all creative researchers should do a degree in social science, but it's like, systemic issues are problems that affect the whole society. They're problems that permeate politics, economic society, and culture. So another thing, of course, that this university has is amazing research leaders. And there's one person that I really look up to, and I think you all know her, Bridie Bartlett, who's a researcher here at QCGU. And she wrote in an article called A Conceptual Framework for Understanding and Articulating the Social Impact of Community Music. She points out that trying to solve real complex societal problems is an ambitious agenda that requires systemic understanding and research. And this is also through her work that I came across this. Probably know that most of you know what this is. If I think about Inheritance, the film that I just showed you, I barely touched the micro with my work. And when I saw that, I thought, my God, in some ways, a world opened up to me, thinking, what if we could do research that could tackle the method as well, organizations, communities, and neighborhoods? What if we could simultaneously penetrate the system? And I think that's a really exciting idea that I would like to kind of consider further. So one thing is that structural solutions to systemic inequalities go beyond individual levels, and that's just what this proves. Now, there is already, of course, amazing research at Griffith University. And I can think of the three beacons, and I'm very proud to be associated with them. I think they do have the potential. They're already doing work that is in the transformative research space. They're all the research institutes that also work with the beacons, alongside the beacons, to create work. We have a number of ARC projects that are also tapping into that world, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that this work is happening. And I'm certainly really excited about the projects that I'm doing with the beacons. Now, the question though is that, it's easy to say, let's get into it. What do we do? How do we do this? And I think a question that I found, this question in one of the papers that I read about transformative research, and this question is something that I think I've started using when I come up with a research problem. Because in this question, to me, what is clear is that it is addressing the transformative change, but it's also talking about the impact. What can we do to create impact? For me, research is, for the sake of research, is pointless. I am a non-traditional researcher, so I don't have a lot of citations. And so for me, what is really critical is when I see a change in someone, when I see a change in a community, to me that is impact. That's sort of the impact that I'm after. If I think back to all the things that I've mentioned, Inheritance, there's also Lily, The Trouble with St. Mary's. All these three films that I made could have benefited from being part of a larger scale research project. Issues that looked at issues around environmental pollution, transgenerational trauma, and religious freedom. Sorry about spelling. But now I arrive at the point where I can talk to you about two projects that I think are the ones that are moving slowly towards what I believe transformative research is. And one is the Israel story of project. I'll show you.
Ayet! Ayet! Ayet!
Asia!
Hi. Can you hear me? I have no memory of my past. No memory of me. Please stay with me.
Doe the accent! Halt! Halt, hold die Scheiße! Hände hoch! Hände hoch, habe ich gesagt!
So this particular research project began with a photograph and my connection to that photograph. And out of that grew three major projects that addressed the problem and the issue that this photograph represented. And again, this was an organic process. This was not, I have to say, at the beginning, a strategic kind of process, if that makes sense. It was more like, oh, what if we did this? Oh, why don't we just make that? Do that. So it was a really bit of, one step at a time process. But it is interesting to look back and analyze what's come of it. And I do think, I like to think that in some ways it is starting to resemble a project that sits within the community and beyond the community, and is starting to make impact beyond the screen world. And of course, it's an amazing honor to be invited to Venice, but I have to say that the feeling of not knowing that the film is now going to, this is a 360 film, by the way. Sorry, I forgot to say that Sarah was a 360 immersive film that some of you know about. That the fact that this film is now going across Australia into high schools where young children, students from the age of 16 onwards are able to engage with the story. To me, that gives me a lot more satisfaction than being selected for Venice. And that, of course, came about, and I have to say, because we were able to receive a grant from the Gandalf Foundation in Melbourne, close to $100,000, that allows us to take the work into high schools and museums. And there's a lot going on beyond the film festivals. We've got partners all across Australia who are taking the film and taking it and embracing it, and we're doing study guides. So there's a real process happening now that is very, very exciting. Of course, as I think Vanessa alluded to it, the project has resulted in a new collaboration with the Queensland Holocaust Museum. So everything is leading to the next thing, and that's really a wonderful process. Of course, I have to acknowledge a number of people who are not here today: Jacqueline McClendon and Bob Lee Dionysius, who were key to making this work a possibility. And now, as I stand in front of you, the film is being translated to Swedish, so it's going to go to Swedish schools as well. So it's got a Hungarian version, it's got an English version, and it's going to go to Swedish schools, which is very exciting. And again, there's a learning process that as well for students who are actually making the Swedish version. So we had a session where where they met our sound designer, so they're learning about immersive sound, again, through this experience. So it's really kind of spreading to the point that it is very exhausting, but it is very exciting, very exciting. And I come to this project, which I am very, very excited about. Actually, it's been in development for the last 4 years, as some of you may know, sitting here. The Story Festival, it came from the idea that, I guess, as a young person coming to Australia, I felt quite isolated, not being able to speak English, and so I thought, what if there's an opportunity for young people today from different cultural backgrounds to come together, share stories, and tell the stories the way they want to tell it. So it's about agency as well. And so we have successfully run the first Story Festival workshop, where students came together from 4 high schools and essentially learned how to tell their own stories through various mediums. And we have some of the teachers here today who have worked on it and also who will work on the project, because it is going into its 2nd year. I do want to share one film with you, Marina, who is a girl who was quite shy at the beginning, and she wanted to tell a story about her home country, Afghanistan. She was on the last plane out of Afghanistan, and she participated in our workshop, and we had 4 sessions out of that. I think Marina came only to 2, and I just didn't think at that point that she was going to actually make a film. And in the very last moment when we finished all the workshops, and I visited the school, Marina's school, and I said to Sue, the teacher, I said, look, I'm here for half a day, so is Catherine Chadiak, who's also one of the lecturers. We are here, we can help Marina tell the story. And suddenly Marina turned up and said, yes, help me tell my story. So I'm going to show you the film that she made, which we played as part of the Story Festival.
Afghanistan is a country of mountain and villages. In winter, my favorite place, Bamyan, feels so cold. Snow lies all over the fields and mountain that surrounded Bamyan. People play in the snow, making slides and snowmen. I was one of them. Living in Afghanistan is beautiful, but in its beauty, there is a shadow of pain. The fire of the war melted my memories of the snowfield, transforming into the ash of my past. As an Afghan, you can understand what the real peace feels like, but you get to learn how to live it with the fear and survive in pain. I wish Afghanistan had a tongue, because it's not just a country, it is a part of existence of people who live there. Afghanistan may be a country with painful stories for many, but for those who lived in Afghanistan, they felt and touched Afghanistan and smelled for their suffering and sometimes cried. The story of Afghanistan is different for everyone. For many, Afghanistan is the story of their love affairs because they found their love in Afghanistan. For others, it's a refuge that has brought them their dreams. And for many, Afghanistan is depend on their lives. For me, Afghanistan is my childhood, who I had to leave behind.
One thing, I will read this out quickly because this is quite an amazing piece of news, and some of you have heard about this, but when Marina made this film and she showed it here at the Story Festival, it was such a transformative experience for all of us present there. And I had no idea that transformation will continue beyond the university and beyond Marina's life. who felt so warranted having made the film. Sue Cameron, her teacher, took Marina down to a conference in Adelaide, and this is what she said. Marina's film was presented at the 3rd National Conference on Trauma Recovery in Adelaide, where the film was shown to a number of senior clinicians from interstate. After the screening, Marina was approached by a senior clinician from the New South Wales Stats, who asked if Marina would consider allowing her to use the film as part of her training for new staff. So now the film that she made is being used to train new staff, and the film continues to, get goals, I guess, that way. So it's really, really exciting. And so, quickly, I know I'm running out of time, but I've applied the social graph to the Story Festival, and I was very glad to see that, in some ways, we are creating connections on 2 critical levels, and I'm also very hopeful that as the project grows, and if we are successful with the Horizon grant, which we applied for, that we can move into the macro as well. So I'm certainly going to be using this map as a guide to build the impact and the build strategy into my work. I'm getting very close to the end of my presentation, and I would like to, before I finish, talk about impact. I think impact, and I've been talking about impact for the last 45 minutes, but I do want to say that I think, and it's a reality that there's no clear, at this stage, there's no clear and robust mechanism set up by the ARC at this stage, I think, to document research impact in the creative space. And I think social sciences, humanities and creative arts, I think we are constantly on the radar about whether we can or cannot create impact. Something for us to really be conscious of. And I think regardless of whether our work ends up being part of a transformative research project, I think we just continually have to, we can't forget how important it is to document what we do and to tell stories about what we do. And use social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, if you like, whatever, to continue to tell stories about the work we do, because that is how we survive. Stories are about impact, and stories of people, transformations will continually, live amongst us, and I think we need to continue to push that. So I guess, in conclusion, I'd like to say, I really like this idea that it takes, I'm so sorry, I left it. I was a child and embarrassing, but it is so important for us to think of it. And when I think of transformative research, which is a collaborative research project, and I think of us as the university, I think there are similarities of how we can pursue excellence and really make impact in the community. And that is to work together, and if I think about, all the challenges that lie ahead of us, with budget cuts and everything else, I don't think we as a university need to think that it's just us with all the responsibility. We have to look beyond ourselves as an institution and think of external partners who also have a stake and an interest in supporting international students or local students to tell their stories or to finish their studies. And certainly if I think back to my time as the program director for the Master of Screen Productions at the film school, when students succeeded, they succeeded not because of me, they succeeded because they were surrounded by people who cared about them. People at the production company that mentored them, that ended up giving them work in the end, the people who housed them. And so it was a system, it was a very, very healthy, there was equilibrium, and I think that's what we need to, that's what I'm sort of learning from transformative research as a concept and as a research process, is that we can apply that to other parts of our lives as well. We can't do it on our own. That's it.